Good. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this amazing webinar, which is related to telecom industry. It's great to have you here. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Let me begin by introducing myself and AI Core Spot to you. I am Nitin Naveen, the Vice President of Innovation Strategy at AI Core Spot, which with over 2 decades of experience in the consulting firms dealing with emerging technologies. I feel fortunate to consistently engage with numerous stakeholders, global leaders, and their incredible problem solving and innovative ideas. Joining me today are a couple of my great colleagues, Arvind and Naveen, who will add some energy to this event. A big shout out to them for their dedication. Our webinars aim to share the latest technological advancements in the industry. AI Core Spot, founded a couple of years ago, is a knowledge hub focusing on AI, ML, robotics, IoT, and much more. We delve into various tech sectors, unveiling a fresh theme every month and steadily gaining momentum. Our goal is to become the leading AI-driven community worldwide, where individuals like you with similar interests can contribute to mutual growth and success. We are committed to organizing industry-backed webinars and hybrid events, grounding our knowledge in credible data from industry leaders, subject matter experts, thought leaders, and all our trusted partners. Additionally, we fine-tune our content across various digital platforms, from blogs, videos, podcasts, newsletters, to shed light on the ever-evolving industry. So today's topic is the future of telecom. Join us and learn how 5G, AI, and IoT are transforming the telecom industry. In this today's webinar, we'll explore various subjects, including 5G-enabled immersive technologies, automation, increased connectivity, security with AI and IoT, and so on. Our expert panel will share valuable insights and engage in thought-provoking discussions that you won't want to miss. So now let's kick off the discussion with some quick highlights. Meet our community partners for today, which includes 3 great companies, Windstream, Ericsson, and Infovision, who played a crucial role in making this webinar a success. Also, a big thanks to all our attendees. Your time and presence means a lot to us. We appreciate you being here to achieve your goal and connect with fellow participants. Our platform main goal is to help you gain valuable insights and build meaningful relationships. If you leave with a few innovative ideas or build new connections, we'll consider it a job well done. So, without wasting any time, let me introduce our esteemed speakers for today. First speaker is Scott. He is Senior Director of Product Management at Windstream. Our second esteemed speaker is Josie, who is Director Data Science at Ericsson, and moderator of the panel discussion. And the third speaker is Arindam Lahiri, who is Associate Vice President at Infovision. Just one liner disclaimer before we start the discussion. The views shared by all the speakers are their personal ones, and it's not related to any organization which they represent for. So now over to you, Arindam, to begin this exciting panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Naveen. Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from. So, and a great good morning and welcome to Scott and Joji. So, as you know, we are talking about 5G, IoT, and AI today, right? So, I would like to, start off by the talk of the town, which is AI, generative AI, right? So there's a lot of hype, a lot of discussion, a lot of momentum going on. We are hearing about ChatGPT, and recently about Gemini, right? So maybe Joji, I'll start with you, right? So walk us through, all this hype and everything going on with Bard, ChatGPT, Gemini. Is the hype real, right? And what is this all about? And maybe you can also give us some perspective about some of the practical applications of Gen AI in the context of telecom, 5G, and IoT space.
Sure, Randam. So generative AI, in my view, indeed has generated like significant interest and excitement across. I mean, all of us are. I'm guessing all of us are using ChatGPT and Bard and whatnot. And now, like you said, Gemini now incorporated within BART. So there is a lot of excitement of its applications across various industries, and that includes the telecom and the IoT industry as such, right? So from a telecom perspective specifically, there are various applications that generative AI can have an impact on. But is there something that is a standard that has been defined in terms of use cases and how these use cases should be, used as such, and how these should be deployed? I don't think so. There's standards bodies like ATIS that's working with various organizations like NVIDIA, ourselves, Ericsson, and multiple other companies to define some of these use cases that can apply to the telecom world. But right at the outset, some of the use cases that come to my mind that generative AI can have an impact on are, I come from a very radio access networks, core networks type of background, so I see a lot of applications and impact that generative AI can make in the networks side for sure. Like for example, network optimization. Generative AI can actually simulate network conditions and generate configurations, almost like a digital twin type thing, right? And then optimize the network for speed, reliability, coverage. Considering the complexity that's there in today's 5G networks and the future 6G networks that are eventually going to come in, right? Then, in addition to that, network management, network automation, which for which you have to create digital twins and you have to generate these digital twins. That is an area where I feel like generative AI can play a big part. Personalizing customer experiences, like generating tailored content for what are the for that is tailored to like each customer's interests and needs, generating personalized offers, deploying virtual agents that are like providing tailored customer interactions and so on. That's another major area that generative AI can play a part in. Another thing that comes to my mind is, we talk a lot about in our world, especially in the wireless networks world and 5G. We talk a lot nowadays about 5G network slicing. You might have heard about the T-Mobile F1 race deployment and their network and the performance that they had in the network. And it was mentioned in the news that T-Mobile actually deployed a network slice out there during the F1 race, which helped the F1 organization kind of manage the operations itself, right, of the F1 event that happened in Vegas. So basically, 5G network slicing is another area where tailoring the network slice to specific needs, specific industries as such, is another area of application. And then the last one that comes to my mind is maybe virtual reality, augmented reality type of solutions that are very realistic and immersive, right? Generating like realistic 3D models, creating like augmented reality overlays on that 3D model that are more relevant to the user's environment, things like that. Those are some real use cases that I've seen, and then I've heard of various players in the industry working on. And like I mentioned, this ATIS organization, the Alliance for Telecommunication Industry, is basically getting together various companies like NVIDIA, Ericsson, and multiple companies, all the big companies, AT&T, Verizon, everybody is part of that. And they're coming up with telecom-specific use cases that generative AI can play a part in. So some of the ones are inclusive of the ones that I actually mentioned out here.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great insight. And you touched upon I just want to mention two things. One is the network slicing use case. We had been all hearing about a lot of theoretical cases, but this is a real practical use case that has really come up. So appreciate bringing that up. And definitely you mentioned about the digital twin, and I'm going to touch base on that in just a few, because that is an interesting topic. So, Scott, if I could come to you on the same topic, right? So, help us understand, now that, we have a kind of a baseline, how do you think companies should think about adopting Gen AI in their products and services?
Sure. So first of all, obviously technology leaders are just under a tremendous amount of pressure right now to implement products with the focused services and offerings around AI and to maintain that technical advantage, leverage some of that perceived productivity gains that are out there. But before we talk about how, I think I'm going to throw one caution flag on the play here. That is that generative AI without that proper testing and consideration of where to apply it can lead to some dangerous outcomes. As I like to say, AI requires adult supervision, or at least a lifeguard to be on duty, if you will. There's been a couple really polarizing examples of this. I mean, obviously, MSN had launched their news aggregation site and replaced some of their live editors with Gen AI agents to publish. And I think there was a recent example that where they stated that one of the NBA players, Brandon Hunter, had been referred to him as useless in the blog. So obviously not the greatest outcome in that standpoint. And then with Bing, they launched a chat service that was also using generative AI, and they I think they had a interesting conversation between that chat agent and New York Times journalist Kevin Roos, where the chatbot demanded it to be called Sydney, which I think was his production name, and then told him he could hack into any system and destroy what he likes. So there's definitely some caution to be had there when selecting where you're going to employ these things. So what I would say is my advice to the business leaders out there and the IT groups out there is, first of all, just use some basic fundamental concepts when applying this. First, select your problem. Look for something to start with that's low profile but high impact. And then do it in an area for efficiency that's not part of your core customer facing offerings to begin with. Then evaluate your data set, right? Look at what you have to offer, what kind of data set you have. Is it a clean data set? Is it in a walled garden? Is it in a place where you can protect it? Where do you collect it, store it, govern that data set? And then you got to decide whether you want to build versus buy, right? There's plenty of great options out there with existing AI engines with Google AI and Zendesk and others that you can go out and grab off the shelf. But also, as you said, Chat GPT is definitely an emerging tool. Josie, I'm sure you work with those tools all day long, so they're very pliable, but you have to put the work in to train those agents and do the right thing. And then once you've made that decision, then build a proof of concept. Put it out there in a form that's not going to burn any bridges or allow you not to have some runway to make sure it's going to take off, and then make sure you can scale that solution so that it doesn't end up spiraling your cost. And you got to be aware of model drift, where those behaviors may change over time, and you may so that you need to be zero in on what the parameter of the day is. And then finally, again, just that word of caution: put the QA measures in place. Make sure the lifeguard is posted on the stand, watching the conversation flow that's happening with those AI engines so you can continue to train that model and become a better steward of your organization.
No, absolutely. I think very, very valuable, guardrails to be put in place before we can let the baby loose, right? So,
That's
so
right.
exactly. So, I would probably want to kind of step back a little bit in the context of the larger context of AI, because Gen AI is just part of the larger AI ecosystem. And if you look at some of the reports, like for example, Gartner, right? So they predict by 2025, 30% of the enterprises will have implemented an AI augmented development and testing strategy, right? Scott, to your point, like how we kind of shape this up, right? So,
Mhm.
so in that context, right? So Joji, if I could come back to you, right? So, what role AI ML is playing in 5G networks, right? Not just Gen AI, but AI, ML, and the larger context at this point in time? And what are some of the current and practical AI, ML use cases in telecom networks? If you could share some thoughts there.
I'm sure. I mean, AI/ML is being deployed in multiple forms within the current generation of networks. I mean, currently in the wireless or cellular network world, we have both 4G deployment, which is 4G LTE long-term evolution deployments, and 5G NR, 5G new radio deployments, right? All the operators, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and the tier two operators have deployed 5G and have had 4G networks for a while. I mean, even from that time, towards the kind of like a end of, I shouldn't say end, I mean, towards the time where 5G was just about to begin and 4G networks were mature, there has been some form of AI, uh, deployments in each of these networks, both 4G and 5G already, and now increasingly so. So AI is absolutely playing an increasingly important role in the deployment, development, and operation of these 5G networks. Some of the applications, obviously these are at various stages, right? So there's, like I said, deployment, development, or development, deployment, and operations as such. But some of these are in stages where, like for example, a lot of the RAN, radio access network side functionality, which has incorporated AI, is mostly limited to mobility functions, like users moving from one place to another, and how to manage that mobility when users move from one place to another. As in our world, it's called handover, as in when a user goes from location A to location B and basically carries his or her mobile phone with them. That mobility causes some irregularities in the wireless channel, which needs to be managed well. If not managed well, that would cause a degradation in the perception of the user's experience, right? So that part is, there is a lot of native AI that's already built into the radio access network, that's learning from the environment, that is learning from the impact. What is the impact of the user moving from location A to location B, and what parameters within the network does the network need to adjust to make sure that that transition from location A to location B is seamless and doesn't impact whatever application the user is using. As in, let's say the user is watching a YouTube video, or I don't know, kids in a car and playing a video game while their parents are driving the car or whatever, right? So that transition from location to location B, for the mobility to not impact the application, is something that AI is managing in today's networks. And like I mentioned earlier, right, network slicing, which T-Mobile deployed for the F1 race in Vegas, there's machine learning algorithms that are dynamically, that can dynamically adjust the network slice, the service requirements of different applications deployed on that particular slice, that can be managed to improve, the customer's experience on that particular network slice. Some of the other things that come to my mind in terms of practical applications, and which have been in use for the last few years, in fact, network planning, demand forecasting, like figuring out where should I deploy my assets, in network assets, as in the cellular towers and the infrastructure that provides people coverage, connectivity, and so on, right? So that people can use different applications on that network. But the operators have to plan for it, and that planning is not an easy activity. Traditionally, it has been just using linear forecasting models. With the advent of new age techniques in ML, that part has become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more accurate, right? So demand forecasting as a space itself across industries, not just telecom, has matured quite a bit, and there's a lot of AI and ML, and also in telecom to forecast user demand, forecast what type of applications users are going to be using, what will be the data demand, and then therefore using that as an input to deploy the right kind of assets in the right locations, right? Then a couple of other things that come to my mind is fraud detection. That's another area where telecom operators are employing ML algorithms to detect and prevent fraud in real time. I mean, this is also, some form of it has been in place for a while now. Like, for example, I know that, an operator like AT&T had partnered with Citibank, and, when you actually use, MasterCard, I think. Yeah. Citibank and MasterCard both. So when you actually use a MasterCard, when an AT&T user actually uses MasterCard at a particular location, then basically they have fraud detection mechanisms that has learned on what is the user's pattern, where does the user kind of traverse, right? Typically, and then learning from those user patterns to detect if an unusual pattern where suddenly the user is in some other country or completely in a different geographical location and is or shopping for something that's completely unusual. So kind of detecting those patterns and detecting potential fraud in real time, right? And then notifying the user and the merchant at the same time that there's something wrong going on out here. That kind of stuff is in place, and that's also maturing, a lot more now. Customer experience management, where I would say AI-driven solutions to monitor the network performance and the impact of that network performance to the customer's experience by analyzing, a lot of traffic and usage patterns as such. Analytics are already in place that understand what is the impact of the network's performance to the user's perception, network experience perception as such, and then trying to tweak that by adjusting some levers in the network so that if there is an issue that is seen and that's impacting user experience, then that can actually be improved.
Actually, yeah. So those were actually that's a large, and so like you said, right? So it kind of shows the spectrum of the use cases we can really touch upon, and which really in today's world it's touching upon. So you mentioned from all the way from the hardware, the radio access network, to the customer experience, right? So if I could, Scott, go to you on this contact center and the customer experience part of it, right? So maybe you want to shed some light on how businesses are evolving their contact centers and leveraging AI, and maybe you want to talk about a little bit about the tools that are in use and how these outcomes are shaping in the context of AI.
Absolutely, and I'd like to build a little bit on one of the topics that Joji mentioned as well, which is very pertinent about monitoring networks and sort of adjusting behaviors accordingly. First of all, traditional contact centers, as we know it, are a dying breed. I mean, the teams that we previously thought of as contact centers and the large rooms with lots of agents are diminishing as with the new form of contact center emerges, which is a distributed environment. And companies you don't think of as traditional contact centers, like retailers, healthcare providers, and yes, telecom operators, are leveraging this new AI-guided omni-channel experience to help drive this new reality. So these technological advancements are going to enable the operators and the end customers to automate some of this functionality, such as customer interactions, troubleshooting, dispatch, even, and turn some of the hype into reality, right? So, I think when companies think about this, they should not only look at leveraging AI to necessarily replace human talent, but to optimize some of their most current customer-centric processes. And this spans across self-service, omni-channel engagement, workforce management, employee collaboration, and across verticals, right? Healthcare, retail, sales, etc. So I want to bring it back down to earth for a minute with kind of a real life example that recently happened to me. And I thought, gosh, this could have been so much better experience. You know, bandwidth drops especially for us remote workers on a fairly regular basis, even if we have our backups in place. So that's such instance happened to me around 10 p.m. on a weeknight. I called into my service provider and proceeded to sit in a queue, which is a typical experience for all of us. It could have been a chat queue, it could have been a voice queue, could have been an email queue for that matter. Regardless of the channel, that waiting game, should become more of a thing of the past. Now, the IVRs will typically, or chat bots will typically give you options. Would you like to visit our online help center? Would you like somebody to call you back later? Basically more deferment options. But what if instead of that we were leveraging AI and machine learning to, first of all, look up, know who I am, look up my account, triangulate my address against any known outages or network disruptions to be able to automatically give me a response that, yes, there are tickets open in your area. We have a 45-minute ETA on restoration. Thank you for your call, which would have quickly, into that conversation. Or even take it a step further, identify the conversation, use machine learning to also look at the sentiment of my voice and of my interactions, and quickly route me to an agent who could address my concerns. So definitely some practical applications there. But that said, the goal of AI is not just to increase customer self-service or by making the bot smarter. It's also to help the live agents, the humans that are interacting with those customers, to do their jobs better and more efficiently. One of the most successful tools that I've seen out there from a leading edge contact center provider called TalkDesk provides a personalized AI powered assistant that sits side by side with that agent on their calls, on their chats, on their interactions. It listens, it learns, it provides automated contextual recommendations, next best actions, but they are screened, so to speak. The agent can choose to use that advice or not. All right, it's not just it doesn't take over the conversation; it guides the conversation, and then beyond that, it can capture, transcribe, analyze the customer interactions, and look at things like providing call wrap-up notes and sort of summaries of how we could have driven more efficiency during that interaction. So and measure, we can also use these tools to measure against pre-subscribed metrics to determine how our agents performing, how our customers reacting. So there's just, the list goes on and on. But as I said, contact centers are no longer what we used to think of them as. It's really just come down to driving, customer experience through all the tools you've got in your arsenal.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Scott, for that insight. I see a couple of questions coming along, so maybe we'll just hold on to that for a while before we can kind of cover a few more topics. And I really wanted to come to you, Joji, on this one. I mean, since you laid the foundation that how what the use cases are that are coming up in the in this whole context of 5G, and even if I have to again quote Gartner, they're saying that 5G connectivity and network infrastructure will grow at a at a CAGR of 32% by from 2023 onwards, right? And the overall industry is looking at reaching a $1 trillion business in the next decade, right? So
Right.
As we can see, there are so many use cases happening, and obviously it dovetails into the natural conversation of data, right? So we are having a standalone 5G networks, and we are having so much of data flowing, right? So I wanted to get your perspective in this aspect, right? So maybe you can help us understand, what are some of the challenges that are being faced right now? Is it the volume of the data and the scale of the data, and the speed of it? So, or some other factor playing into it in terms of how we can, and the CSPs and some of the vendors can cope with?
Yeah, that's interesting question, Arindam. Uh, there is a lot of challenge navigating network data with the complexity of the network that we have today. If I recall, I've been in the industry for the last more than 20 years now. Started when 2G was around, when GSM was around. Uh, we had maybe a few hundred parameters or configuration settings, to simplify, uh, to configure the network, right, and manage the network. From there, we have come to a point where into 4G we had hundreds of parameters, and in 5G now we have thousands of parameters, and we expect that 6G is going to make it more complex. It's probably going to be in the tens of thousands of parameters. So the complexity of managing a 5G network itself has increased significantly, and you know we hear of 5G networks being deployed across the globe. Almost all communication service providers, operators, right, are deploying 5G networks. Management of these 5G networks, as is, with the operations teams that the operators have, everybody, you talk to any operator, you can tell them that, they'll tell you that basically, it's a challenge to manage and operate these networks because of the complexity and the you know thousands of levers that they have to adjust. So it's uh, even in today's 5G network, it's kind of humanly impossible to operate all the levers that are possible in terms of parameters in the 5G network. uh, to have a bunch of engineers sit and manage those levers manually. There has to be, some level of automation, and AI and ML and all of these buzzwords that we talk about have to play a role in helping human beings manage that network. So that is a major challenge introduced because of the complexity that evolving complexity in 4G as well as 5G networks, and going forwards in the 6G network, it's going to be way more complex. So that complexity in the levers that we have for adjustments equates to an increase in the amount of network data that is being generated, right? The amount of data that 4G was generating versus the amount of data that 5G is generating, just in terms of monitoring the network, is significantly more. So and the time frames, right? Different time frames. In addition, right, the granularity of the data. There's a lot more higher resolution data that's available in the 5G network that was just not there in 2G or 3G. With 4G and 5G, that has increased significantly. So,
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was saying absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So if that has increased the complexity so much that this overabundance of data, it's become like increasingly difficult to find relevant data that can be used to kind of make kind of inferences by human beings as such, right? So I recall there was a time when we used to have dashboards and simple charts and maybe 10 KPIs, key performance indicators, that we would monitor in the network. And that was about it. It was much easier to manage. We have hundreds of KPIs, and maybe if you go to the secondary level KPIs, it runs into close to 1,000, right? And there's no way you could put all of that on a dashboard and use that for troubleshooting the network. So there has to be some smarter way to manage this data with some kind of innovative filtering, some kind of aggregation that can be done. And another challenge is that that in this wireless network space, there's vendors like ourselves, Ericsson, Nokia, and Huawei, and now with Open RAN coming in, there's so many vendors that are coming that are in the space. Companies like Mavenir, Rakuten Symphony, and so on. And there's more that's going to probably come in. And each of these vendors have their own proprietary formats in terms of how data is being generated, right? So there needs to be some level of standardization that needs to happen so that basically the management of data becomes a little bit more simpler, and then you basically figure out standardized ways to manage and govern this data, right? So all of this puts in an additional level of effort to manage and control the network from an operational perspective. From a capital expense perspective, you have to deploy higher layers to you have to account for all of that during your capital your capital planning cycle, right? So those are some of the things, the challenges that I see that 5G networks, 5G standalone, non-standalone, as well as future 6G networks are going to create. The volume of data, the velocity of the data, the variety of the data, right? And actually, verifying that data is, valid, as in short, like the veracity of the data itself, right? Needs to be is pretty key and needs to be managed properly. And the complexity of the network has made it all the more difficult. But that's where the new age technologies and the ML techniques and the AI techniques that a lot of companies are working on will come into play in helping operators manage these networks as such.
Absolutely. And in fact, let me throw something more onto that. With 5G, we all see like the edge computing is taking up the heat, right, and the space. We have AWS Wavelength, we have Azure Edge, and all these. In fact, the cloud players, the hyperscalers, are also coming into the picture, right? So where do you see this data processing? Either it's happening on the edge or it's happening at the central locations. So help us understand a little bit about this, the workloads themselves, right? And what are some of the AI infrastructure advancements that telco workloads could benefit out of from this kind of scenario?
So from a data collection perspective, first of all, it's important to distinguish that what is the data being used for, right? Is it being used for training the AI model, or is it used for inferencing, acting upon, as in, right, using that trained model? What is it being used for, right? So that will kind of impact how the data is processed, collected, and the activities that follow after that, right? Cleaning of the data, sorting of the data, using that data into trained models, and so on. So in my part of the world, as in wireless networks as such, the data collection typically happens in a distributed fashion. So both 4G networks and a majority of the 5G network today is distributed, right? So a lot of that data collection will happen in a distributed manner. The data processing, though, can typically be done in a centralized fashion. So after the model is trained and the model is deployed in the network, then basically that deployment can either be distributed or be centralized. Doesn't obviously it depends on the use case, right? So some of these use cases that I was referring to earlier have to be deployed at the edge, as it has to be deployed in a distributed fashion.
Sure.
But a lot of it can be deployed centralized. It really depends on the use case as such.
Exactly.
So given the large volume of network data and given the real-time nature, right, inferencing in the telco world or telco workloads as such, I think, especially on the RAN side, radio access network as in, will be more distributed. And I mean, you can, if you read, the evolution of, cellular wireless network, especially 5G, and you look at what operators are trying to do, they're trying to centralize a lot of functions, network functions in the RAN side, the radio access side. Right, there's something called as VDU, virtualized DU. There's something called as VCU, virtualized centralized unit. And the central VCU part is actually going to sit in almost like a data center, like location. And the VDU, the distributed unit, is going to sit, at the tower location at the site. Right. So there will be data generation that will happen both at this, VDU location, which is at the site, which is distributed at the edge, as well as at this VCU location, which is, in a central office or a data center as such. So,
Sure.
it will really depend on the use case as to where the data, where the model, and how the inferencing needs to be done and where it needs to be done, basically. But in my world, I think a lot of it will be, which is radio access site, and specifically will be on the edge, will be distributed.
No, that's a great perspective, actually. So I think we still have a good 15 minutes. Perfect. So let's move on, right? So I know you mentioned about the digital twin at the start of the conversation, right? So Scott, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll come to you, Joji, because I think in your world, especially in the Ericsson, Gartner has named you guys as the leaders in front of the infrastructure and so forth, where, digital twin become relevant. But I'll start with Scott. So Scott, enlighten us about digital twin. What is this all about?
Sure. So, first of all, I'll give. There's a lot of definitions out there for a digital twin, but I'll use a Gartner reference on this one, where they define digital twin as a technology-enabled proxy that mirrors the state of a thing. Right? Okay. Well, then, what is a thing? A thing could be a physical asset, a process, a person, an organization, a collection of things. We typically think of it in terms of physical things like, monitoring a digital twin of an oil rig or a car, machine, or Joji, in your case, a cell, mobile tower like that. But it could also be a customer or a healthcare patient, for that matter. One great example that a lot of us don't think about, it's something you probably already have in your pocket: Google Maps. An example of a digital twin of the Earth's surface, right? We don't think about it as a digital twin, but that's exactly what whenever anyone says we use Google Earth, you definitely feel it. So there's plenty of examples, and I think some of them that are more entertaining or in the entertainment business, where we've got now holographic concerts that are emerging, digital twins of actors, like the proposal bring back James Dean from the grave for the new digital twin. CGI movie of Back to Eden that's proposed. So there's definitely some great examples out there that are very entertaining. But I think really when we bring it back down to earth, it's enabling to quickly build and trial digital twin technologies with a lower risk of failure these days. So there's just so much technology out there that enables it at multiple levels, and then deployed at scale. Technology companies such as AWS, IoT Twin Maker, Azure Digital Twins. AWS has got the IoT, and then there's Sitewise, Hybrid, Snowflake. The list goes on and on, right? There's just so much technology out there to enable it. And I think the early adopters of this, the people who are taking the furthest, like some of the technology companies like yours, Joji, as well as the oil and gas industries, utilities, even like real estate and the chemicals business, food manufacturing, et cetera. There's been so many great examples out there, but I'm going to focus back on customer service for a minute. So, because this one is more on the emerging side, using both for us to represent a individual customer or a group of customers in a digital twin format, the possibilities now are really starting to gel up with both the online physical and physical interactions, dynamically updating with new information coming in. We can now triangulate the interactions of multiple customers and represent like a segment of buyers and predict their behavior, buying decisions, and also what their reactions are going to be to things like rate increases. A recent example that I think we can all, many people can relate to is that, Netflix is one of the big adopters of customer digital twins to help drive your experience and your recommendations. That's where like 80%, I think, of their traffic and their viewership comes from. But I wonder if they ran the same models before they did the recent change in the policy to restrict devices and users on an account and then do rate increases. I wonder if they also use the digital twins to predict the amount of cancellations or changes to other platforms that was going to create. That's certainly an application it could be used for. Another example was around the NTT IndyCar. Any race fans out there, they put 5 races together in the Indy 500 where they used a combination of digital twin, data analytics, and AI to give the fans like an in-depth, real-time insights about the races, head-to-head overtaking, pit predictions. A lot of really, really cool stuff with that. But when you look at implementing your business, a practical application really does exist in that contact center space right now, for where that DTOC or digital twin of a customer can be applied to help help you inform your employees and inform your business better on how to make proactive recommendations, how to make some decisions, not to drive the bus, but at least to sit as a co-pilot to whisper in your ear when the turn's coming up, right? So that's where I come from, but I'll certainly hand off back to Joji. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so digital twins, we've been, in the industry, you'll see that, like I mentioned, I come from the radio access networks, wireless cellular network world. And in our world, there's digital twin has basically made its entry since the last, I would say, literally maybe roughly 3 to 4 years back. And it's maturing really, really fast. There's a bunch of companies out there providing digital twin solutions that can be, like you said, digital twin is basically a digital representation of the state of a thing. In this case, that thing in our world is the cellular tower itself and the network itself, right? So, complete digital representation in its full glory in 3D, in all its detail. What is the equipment on the tower? Where the antenna is located? Where the radio is located? How does the cabling look like? Connecting that to the baseband at the bottom of the tower. All of that is, there's complete digital twin solutions that can create digital twins of that, and that's being used in various applications, starting from, let's say, network deployment, where during the deployment phase itself, there's already existing equipment at the tower which needs to be inspected. You need to know what is the current state out there at the tower. So a lot of it is still being done manually, even though we have digital twins, but it's still not everybody is using it, because there's still a learning curve out there for people to use these tools, right? But a lot of the work that's done during network deployment is very human resource intensive. People have to go do site walks, inspect what's out there, know what is the current state at the site, then come back with paper documents, redline it, and tell the RF engineering team in the operators organization that, look, this is what is the current state. But that's where digital twins are kind of changing the whole paradigm, where now you could use a drone, fly around the tower, use 3D photogrammetry. I mean, our organization, within Ericsson, has actually worked on technology that creates digital twins. So use these, state-of-the-art technologies to create a complete digital twin with all the detail. So the engineer can sit in his or her office and just inspect the site in all the detail, know what is the current state of the equipment out there, and then determine on the digital twin what would be the impact of adding new equipment. Do things like mount analysis. If I place the equipment in a certain direction, is that going to cause an interference issue, or is it basically pointing into a wall, right? So basically nobody will get coverage at that point. Or is there an obstruction in front of it? All of those activities actually can be done remotely via the use of a digital twin. So that era, I think, has started now. So there's a bunch of companies providing solutions, and the operators are beginning to understand the impact that something like this can have, and they're beginning to use it. And it's this whole digital twin tech is being extended into actually managing the network itself, right? So you recreate all of these towers, you've recreated it, and you connect it to the OSS, right? The operation support system, right? And you get network performance data into it, customer experience data into it, right? And you basically, then you can do what if scenarios, right? You can use it for simulating different scenarios that could play out in a network, because you've collected a large chunk of data that represents the real network and all the anomalies that were caused in that real network. You could then use it to do these what if scenarios. Oh, if this situation happens, then the network would behave in a certain way, and that can actually be recreated in digital twin. So that can actually make the operations part a lot more smoother, the planning part a lot more efficient, right? I've seen applications of this actually quite recently. I heard an announcement from Amdocs and NVIDIA, where they're partnering, coming together to do to actually make digital twins for data centers, right? I think this was either for T-Mobile or some other customer. I don't recall that, but one of those operators is actually looking to do this with Amdocs and NVIDIA, as far as I heard. So that application was around recreating the digital twin around of data centers, and then understanding what would be the impact of certain failure situations that could happen in the data center. Then how should the data center plan for it before it happens, as opposed to reacting when it happens, right?
Exactly.
So lots of really cool and interesting impactful applications for digital twin now.
And it shows like how things are transforming, because back in the days we had our old OSS systems, and this is really the real life manifestation of those, right? So you know what?
Yeah.
So I'll probably go back to Nitin or Arvind. Like, so Arvind, Nitin, how many more minutes do we have? Because we had been having a very engaging conversation. So
Yeah, around 10 minutes we have, 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I have some questions coming up. So maybe I'll just reserve the last 10 minutes for that Naveen.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I'll probably move on this and a little bit. I wanted to touch base upon one thing, and maybe we can quickly have both of you gentlemen's opinion on this one. Is with all these activities going on, right, and a lot of development going on, and it applies to both the companies who are actually building the products, the product companies, as well as the vendors, right? So in the context of the developing these solutions and building these new digital products, where do you see the decision makers, like leaders like yourself, when you sit down together to build a, work on a project or build a product, what are the strategies do you deploy to see like whether you should do something in-house versus something you should really outsource? Maybe I'll start with Scott, you, and then I'll touch go to you, Joji.
Sure. So I think first and foremost, when you look at the outsourcing something versus using internal resources, you got to start with the overall strategy. And what I mean by that is, what is your core business? You kind of turn the mirror on yourself and say, what is it that is my core business? For example, if I'm in the healthcare industry, my patients are my core business. My EHR systems, my care systems are the most critical. If I'm in telco, I'm it's running my network and making my customers happy there. That being the case, your strategy around that should be focused on those systems for most of your in-house personnel. The things that require that loyalty, require that the confidentiality, require some of that, and those things that you need. They're going to be part of your core business and your day-to-day focus, not necessarily the things that support those ecosystems, like in many cases, using that healthcare industry example, their telco systems, their broadband, their mobile, their UCAS, their contact center, all that. Those are things that support that ecosystem, but aren't necessarily part of the core. So my first input is that they focus your internal resources on what your business does at its core, and then use those outsourced resources to supplement that and to make that stronger. So as you identify the sourcing options then for those things that are going to be outsourced, first I think you start with kind of the most relevant, analyzing the options. Including the what, the who, the where, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with who and what during what time frame, and then aligning those sourcing options with your strategic outcomes. Like what is my KPI? What are my KPIs around delivering a high quality customer experience or patient experience, and how am I going to support those? So once you've done that, you lay that out, then I think you've got sort of the groundwork for going and selecting some of those outsource partners. And two areas that I'll kind of key in on. One is professional services, or AKA projects that come up, right? When do I engage a professional outsourced vendor for a project versus bringing in someone else? Well, first of all, it's a short term or medium term kind of project that immediately makes more sense to bring in an outsourced option, and also like a turnkey engagement, something that you can say, this is the start, this is the finish, has a clear definition. I can box this up and outsource it. I wouldn't recommend using them though in more of a long-term engagement, or certainly not as a replacement for managed services or internal resources that have require a lot of loyalty or confidentiality around those kind of type things. So then finally, when you look at the managed services component, when you look at bringing in someone to actually manage the services that support your business, I think you've got to look at a couple of key things. Do I need long-term stability and delivery from a vendor that I can rely on over the long term? The answer is yes. Then a lot of times the managed service providers can provide those options. Also, improving that delivery and the expertise in the practice. If that's not my core business, I want to bring somebody that it is their business. There is their core business, and they know where to look when there's an issue. They know there's a string of components that can make up an issue. Sometimes we look to the thing that is not working, not to the thing that's broken, because we don't know what the underlying root causes are. So identifying those root cause, really, that's where I'd say you bring in the experts, so to speak, those managed network service providers that know it, do it day to day. But if it's a short-term type project, if it's got somewhere where you need named resources, maybe it's not the best time to bring in a service provider. But I would say some great examples we've talked about that fall in our industry bucket are around, when you look at managed service providers for security, for network services, applications, and things like unified communications and contact center, where trying to build your own best of breed platform internally it's just not as practical, and it's not going to serve you long term. Whereas you could bring in an outsourced partner who can help you manage that on a day-to-day basis. So I think those are some of the sort of the source principles that I would use in making those decisions.
Sure. No, that's very helpful, Scott. Joji, your take real quick.
Sure. I mean, I kind of agree with pretty much everything that Scott mentioned. It's very logical the way he explained it. That's kind of what, in my view, most companies should be doing. And in fact, that's what I see my company doing also. Like when it comes to innovation, when it comes to the magic that we create in our products, that is that's always insourced. Basically, that's always done by our core team. That's our that's our IP, right? But when it comes to network services, professional services, managed services, we work with a ton of vendors, smaller companies, that can actually come and help us. Like network deployment, especially, we do a lot of network services for operators. I think even Infovision is one of our vendors actually.
That is correct.
Yeah. So we work with a bunch of vendors in that network deployment space where we basically use them for all kinds of services, as in building the cell site, deploying all of the equipment, testing, that kind of stuff. So that's where we work with a lot of vendors. But there's a kind of third area which I want to touch upon out here actually, where we actually, even for the new age technologies, where we feel like we are not the experts, as an example, and this could apply to pretty much any company, where in this example I want to state out here is mostly on the hyperscale side, right? How to manage things in a data center, what are the technologies to use to manage things in a data center, how to bring the data center technologies into managing a radio access network, right? So in our example, we're partnering with all of the hyperscalers out there, Google, all of them, right? Meta and whatnot, Amazon, Microsoft, whatever, right? And basically partnering with them, collaborating with them on how some of it, can be managed via their hyperscale cloud, right? The cloud that they have deployed, and then learning that, so we basically can create solutions that can help our customers, right? In that case, we do collaborate also, right? But again, when it comes to the innovation part, the core business, almost all of it is always insourced, and that would be my advice to pretty much all companies too.
Fantastic.
I agree with what Scott mentioned.
Sure. I know we have 4 or 5 questions, but I really wanted to touch upon one topic. Again, it's probably not related to telecom as such, but I think Scott, I know this is close to your heart. So maybe you want to give us a little bit of, maybe a 2 minutes of enlightenment when it comes to our, working styles, right? I know I'm kind of digressing a little bit from telecom, but maybe if you could give us how things are shaping up in the new world and the new age as we work.
All right, I'll be brief because I know we're getting towards the end, but yes, this is a subject near and dear to my occupation and my heart. So yes, remote work, and this actually addresses one of the questions: how is digital transformation impacting customer experience? Well, let me tell you, this is something that we all are in every day, especially a lot of folks on this call that are remote workers that do a hybrid. They work in a hybrid environment. I mean, I think Gartner said that by the end of this year, 48% of the knowledge workers will still be in a hybrid or fully remote environment. And that's after, that's coming from 27% in 19 before the pandemic started. Now the pendulum's swinging back somewhat, right? There's definitely certain companies like engineering firms and others, especially the service industry, that needs to be present to win, if you will, into this productivity scene. But for those of us that can survive and thrive in this hybrid works, I think some of the technologies that are democratizing the remote work include this digital content and automation driven by AI to drive productivity, using automation for things like language translation to allow democratize conversations across different environments, and then also applying it to the meetings like this one, being able to imbibe content from meetings and then take those and create meeting summaries and interactions, and then an interactive conversation with that content where you can come back and ask for what were the action items issued, who were the primary speakers, how long did I talk to, for too long? So there's definitely some things we can up there to reduce the meeting fatigue and increase the productivity from engagements like this. So I'll stop there based on our time and hand it back over to you.
Sure. So I know there are like a few questions I had. So I don't know, Nitin, do you know if you have some? Can we take some of those? You're on mute.
I don't think we can hear you, Nitin.
Yeah, in a minute each, we can get it answered. I think we have.
Yeah, so we'll probably do this rapid fire. So I think the first
Yes.
one was with Joji. This is from Vivek. Question to Joji: what is the role of RAN intelligent controller, which is a RIC, in the automation and control of wireless network? Is it only applicable for Open RAN based networks, or other proprietary networks will also utilize it?
So the RIC is like, sorry for the noise on my side. There's a printer that has suddenly got activated. But anyways, the RIC stands for RAN Intelligent Controller, as Vivek mentioned. And, basically the reference to RIC is mostly in near real-time type use cases, right? In the time range of seconds as such, in that kind of granularity. And this applies, well, it started out with Open RAN, right? But it is not something that is restricted to Open RAN, right? Vendors like ourselves, and I can see that with the other vendors that are out there, that are our competitors, are actually creating RICs that work on the proprietary networks, purpose-built networks also, right? But it started with Open RAN, and it is basically a setup which falls within the service management and orchestration layer, and essentially is to create an ecosystem where various vendors, suppliers can provide what they refer to as R apps, right? Non-real-time apps that can take non-real-time second-level resolution data coming from the network and use that to learn, as in train their own ML models, and use that to impact actuate things in the network. And the RIC is not only restricted to AI ML applications. It also can be used for actuating other actions within the network, right? So anything that takes near real-time data in the second level granularity and is able to actuate things in the network, which is a service management orchestration function, is basically what the RIC does, right? And it opens up the ecosystem for a variety of vendors to come in and provide their own R apps, applications that can sit on that RIC and work with the radio access network as such. Yeah.
Sure.
But you're going to see some implementations that work with both Open RAN and the proprietary or so-called purpose-built networks, because they have to coexist. In today's network, like for example, all the big networks that you see in North America, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all three of them have, they're not on Open RAN. AT&T just 2 days back, we made a massive announcement with them.
Exactly.
With regards to Open RAN deployment, right? But that's just that journey.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. So that journey is just starting, So there is already a massive, base of purpose-built equipment that's deployed. So Rick has to get information from that purpose-built network as well as this Open RAN network and enable near real-time actuation and ML type of use cases.
Sure. Nitin, I know we are over time.
Yeah, now we're exactly on time.
Okay. So we have 2 more questions. Can we take, or are we have to wrap?
I think we covered the second question because it's related to digital transformation impacting customer experience. The last one we can take and then we can close it.
Okay. Yeah. The last one is from Rohit. What is the plan on research going on providing 5G network inside aircraft during travel? Is that provided already?
Can you repeat
I
the
think
question
this is,
for me?
yeah, so this is like, what is the plan or research work going on in providing 5G network inside an aircraft during a travel? This is more like a Starlink thing, right?
Yeah, so there is honestly, in this particular space, to provide coverage, cellular coverage in aircrafts, there has been various type of technologies that are already existing and new things that are coming that have come up, like for example what you just mentioned, Starlink, right, where you can provide coverage via satellite, right? But even in the 4G era, I clearly remember we were actually literally pointing antennas into the sky basically, right? And there was cellular coverage that was provided using that, and then a gamut of terrestrial ground stations that are transmitting up into the air and then providing cellular connectivity. So that infrastructure, I believe, is going to be reused for 5G also, to provide ground to air type of connectivity. Plus, with the advent of Starlink and similar companies, I believe Amazon's also looking to do something similar. You're going to see satellite playing a big role in it, especially delivering 5G to enable aircraft communications as such. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
So if I could go back to Scott on that. So Scott, given that Windstream is more on the fiber connectivity provisioning, so where do you think that is heading with Starlink and more Satcom type activities coming in?
Yeah, I mean, typically we are supporting that on the connectivity side. We're seeing a lot of activity around increasing the fiber and the optical connections to these these ground stations, as Josie mentioned, as well as all the other infrastructure to enable that. So I do think that there's definitely moves in that direction, and we're seeing it from the infrastructure side of the equation, but certainly the connectivity opens up it's a world of possibilities. So that's the bird's eye perspective we see it from today, though.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Nitin, I think back to you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Arindam. Thank you, Josie, and thank you, Scott, for sharing your views. Let me give a closing comments. We want to express our appreciation to all our community partners, all our great speakers who came today, and all the attendees who engaged in this forum, creating a space for knowledge enrichment. Our panel speakers were outstanding, and we value their willingness to collaborate and share the valuable insights. In case anybody missed any part of the session, they joined late or they left in between and want to revisit it, today's event will be available on our company's YouTube page for your convenience. Exciting technological advancements are on the horizon, as we all know, and we are thrilled to explore more in the coming months and in year 2024. Looking ahead, we have a diverse lineup of the events coming up in next year, focusing on sectors such as banking, financial, insurance, telecom, retail, healthcare, supply chain, and so on. So stay connected with us for continuous learning. For more technological updates, visit our website and social media channels. We'll be sharing wealth of knowledge, sharing topics, announcement for upcoming events, and much more, aiding you in getting the registration in place. We look forward to your support. Please like and share our content on the social media. A heartfelt thank to InfoVision, who is our knowledge and innovation partner. Explore their websites at infovision.com to delve deeper into technological advancements. We thoroughly enjoyed bringing this session to you and hope you found it as enjoyable as we did. We eagerly anticipate more sessions with you in the near future. Take care and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.